Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dyler Coltman, joined by my brother Braden Dyler Coltman, and Elliot he is not with us tonight. Braden is celebrating his grandfather's 90th birthday. What an accomplishment, especially on this family day long weekend here for Western Canada. I think if you're out east, it's like Louis Riel Day in Montreal, or pardon me, in Manitoba, and Islander Day, I guess, on Prince Edward Island. But happy family day to all of those Albertans and British Columbians and Ontario. What is someone from Ontario called?
An Ontarian, an Ontariite, and
All right.
Ontarian. I'm not too
Something
sure.
like that. Yeah, I don't know either.
But
Somebody hit us up on
birthday.
Twitter.
Happy birthday, Grampy Tanty. I hope that's what they call him.
Well, I don't know if it's on the Tanty side of the family line.
Oh,
It
yeah,
could be on
right.
the other side. Regardless,
But
I hope when
Grampy
Elliot is a grandfather, they call him Grampy Tanty.
Tanty.
All right, here's the deal. So it's just you and me. We haven't done one of these shows with just the two of us in a little while. I've done a few with Elliot, so we'll see how this goes. Before we get started, though, Braden, we are going to talk about the Olympics. And I don't know if you saw this one story that I wanted to lead with because it was a great lead-in. One of the last events traditionally held in the Summer Games is always the marathon. The equivalent of that in the Winter Olympics is the 50K mass start cross-country skiing event. It's the long one. But there is a blizzard right now in Beijing. And so they cut it down to only a 30K race just out of concern for the athletes. Because I don't know if you've seen cross-country skiers, but they don't wear a lot of clothing. And that was of great disadvantage to Finland's Remi Lindholm, who unfortunately reached the end of the race and needed a warming pad for a very sensitive part of his body. He did in fact freeze his penis during the 30K mass start, and he described it, suggesting that thawing it out was unbearably painful.
Wow.
So he's having a worse day than you or me. And I think we should just leave it right there. Let's get to it. This is topic one.
My God.
All right. So I teased off the top there that we were going to start with the Olympics. I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about the appendages of Finnish cross-country skiers. But we do have a lot of interesting storylines that came out of the Olympics. Obviously, Elliot and I had a good debate about the relevance of the Olympics and certainly also the morality and the political elements of these Olympics in China. And, that's all very true and very much a part of it. We talked last week a little bit too about sort of where we were halfway through the games. We've now reached the conclusion of the games. Would you agree with me that it felt like this games was somewhat subdued and felt a little bit kind of like we are seeing a bit of like a shift in the importance that in Canada, at least right now, that the Olympics seems to hold? Did you feel that way throughout these games?
I think there was a level of subduedness in just the nature of coming out of COVID. There was a lot of feeling like, oh, here we are, and this is, what are they going to do? What are the athletes going to be like? Has there been a decline in abilities? And I don't know necessarily if I would say it's been fully subdued. I think we saw some incredible engagement on the Canadian side for the women's hockey team. There was a lot of excitement around that following. I think the storylines kind of changed depending on the kind of success that each sport has. And I remember back in, I think it was 2010, it might have been the Olympic after, but Alex Bilodeau, the what do you call it, mogul skier. There was a lot of excitement around that, or you think back to some of the figure skaters, and I think there's that it really just kind of changes with one, like what kind of sport you were really engaged by, but also what narratives. And I think there were some interesting narratives that followed this Olympics that we haven't really seen before, and there was excitement, but ultimately it still didn't captivate me the way that it has in the past. I don't know. What about you?
No, I agree. I think that, I think that leading into the Olympics, it kind of felt like, oh, this is happening. And I don't know if there was, like you said, there wasn't really this sort of anticipation or buildup. Obviously, I think that, that's hurt Winter Games wise by the non-inclusion of the NHL players. That's certainly in Canada a big sort of attention drawing thing, which is always true. I do know that, like I said to Elliot, I find I have very little trouble separating the politics of the Olympics from the athletes in the Olympics. For the most part, I feel like I want to give I feel like I don't want to punish the hard work of mostly amateur athletes and their sacrifice and dedication to pursuing these dreams.
Yeah.
I don't want to punish them the same, because of the bureaucracy and the corruption that follows the Olympics as an organization, that follows the country, in this case, China, and all of its huge human rights issues that, again, I think are a part of the story and should not be overlooked. But again, for me, I did find myself tuning into specific events because I wanted to cheer on specific athletes, or, just the athletes from in general. And the human interest stories have always been, for me, what I find most compelling about the Olympics. I don't think that has changed, but perhaps there was an element of, I don't know, like it did feel a little bit different. Let's get to a couple of the big stories. We saw a huge bounce back after a difficult final result in Korea 4 years ago for the women's hockey team. Canada and the United States, I believe, have played in every gold medal final since Nagano. These are clearly the dominant nations when it comes to women's hockey, but it is also exciting to see some of these other nations starting to catch up and compete more aggressively. Finland, obviously the Swedes, the major hockey nations you would expect, but it's just nice to see that there is not yet parity in the women's side, but there's definitely more competitiveness. There was a lot of, let's just say, offensive takes early on in these games by some Canadian press, mainly the Toronto Star, suggesting that why is women's hockey even in the Olympics? It's not competitive at all. Canada and the United States just win anyway. That's the kind of sexist garbage that follows a sport like this. No one complains about the fact that the German men dominate bobsled. They don't care. There's no complaining about that. But because it's women's hockey, there's just this complaining about these routes. Look, there's routes. That's what happens sometimes when you do have these nations that are catching up. But
it's also about programs. Like these two countries have worked tirelessly throughout history to ensure that their identity is based around a sport like this, and their culture is also based around the what that is and what that does. Look at what basketball has grown into. It used to be it was I don't think that necessarily we can see a chant or like an Olympic gold medaling Canadian basketball team, but we are definitely in the right route that we've never been in before. Based on
Canadian men's soccer is demonstrating the same thing.
Exactly.
When the resources and the efforts are put in. So obviously Canada wins. It was an exciting game. Did you watch the gold medal game?
Yeah, I did. It was excellent. I mean, it really could have gone either way. And I think that once the Canadians started getting their game under them and had America chasing, that they really showed why they are so great. And like, just great. There's no one individual. I mean, you could single out Sarah Nurse, or you could single out Poulin or Fillier, but really, like, this team was so they just played all so well together.
Yeah. So the other story I think that will be most defining of these games, I think, over time, specific stories last longer than the moment of the Olympics. I find it interesting that 20 years ago in Salt Lake, obviously, if you're Canadian, the men winning the gold for the first time in 50 years was a huge storyline. You had double gold for the first time. That's huge. Mm-hmm. But the other big story when I say Salt Lake City is the skating scandal, right?
David Pelletier, Jamie Slay.
Right. And the fact that
and the judge.
Once again, the French judge, yes, found ourselves 20 years later with a skating scandal here in Beijing. So for those who have not followed it, 15-year-old Russian skater, Kamila Vileva, in her very first Olympics, she's a phenom, has been winning every tournament that she's been leading up to these Olympics. She was the odds-on favorite for the women's figure skating gold medal. She came in as the favorite. After the team event, which is held first in figure skating, she failed a drug test. So she failed a drug test that found in her system a heart medication. So she tested positive for this. She also tested positive for 2 additional drugs, both of which are legal, but all 3 of them relating to her heart. This is a 15-year-old. What on earth does she need these additional drugs in her system for? Does she have a heart condition? All these kind of questions were coming up, but one of these is illegal in competition. It increases oxygen blood flow to the heart, obviously performance enhancing as a result. So she fails this drug test. This becomes evident because the team medal ceremony, of which Canada won bronze, I believe, was postponed. And there was a lot of question marks. Why wouldn't they hold it as scheduled? And it was because they had to look into this. And then there became this big controversy about the fact that the International Anti-Doping Association, the World Anti-Doping Association, WADA, has a policy of not punishing underage athletes for drug transgressions because they believe that in most of these situations, that athlete is probably not actually making the decisions to take these drugs independently or cannot be held legally responsible for what is in their body. The point being, they could be manipulated, they could be coerced. That's the protection that's there for minors. The same way you don't try minors in adult court for other crimes. That's the rule. However, she's competing with adults, and clearly she has this performance enhancing thing. So this obviously becomes a huge scandal, and they don't really know what to do with this. This is in the early days of the Olympics. They end up deciding to let her compete in the solo, like as a in the women's program, which right from then and there, this whole thing's gone tits up. Like the whole thing's broken, right? If you're going to let an athlete who has tested positive during the Olympics to compete in another event, I mean, where are we, right? Like she is the best skater in the world, but she's clearly doing it broken.
With an enhancement.
Yeah. So the issue, I think, comes down to this is a Russian athlete, right? We know following Sochi, that the Russians were caught cheating on mass scales. The Russians do this, right? They dope at the Olympics. They've been stripped of the ability to be called the Russian the Russian team at the Olympics. They are now called the Russian Olympic Committee. They've been punished in all of these very sort of, I don't know, concrete ways. They should not be
unconsequential ways.
How is Russia?
There's no consequence,
right?
They still compete. Happening. Yeah, so they don't have their actual flag logo, but they have a different logo that represents them still, and with their athletes. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So had she medaled, what would they have done?
I don't know.
Well,
I have
that's
no
so
idea.
Confusing, and this is the problem. If it's not, if you can't try this person because she's a minor, and yet she's competing with adults or other, peers in the field, and they're subject to that kind of consequence, or then it's not an even playing field at all.
No, and 100%.
Well, it doesn't, like, how does that what does that say about the IOC and the actual system that that is in place? If it's about, they go through the whole, like, you will compete fairly, and the pledge for the athletes and the pledge for the teams and the coaches and what we vow to uphold throughout the Olympics. And then you've got this kind of a thing where they're like, sorry, we can't prosecute, we can't look into this. And also it's a team that has a history. We know that they do this.
Yeah. And I think the really sad part about it, I think as well, is the fact that she's a minor. She's clearly being put into this position. The president of the IOC came out at his final press conference of the games and was very critical of her coaches, suggesting that, they have video of when she skated off the ice in tears. They were both screaming at her. This is an abusive system. It's an abusive program. Clearly, the way the Russians are running their figure skating program is in the mid ages still. This is the old fashioned way of how these Olympic athletes were sort of treated like animals. I mean, they're literally, she's there to win them a medal at all costs, and look at what it's cost her. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's just like that. This is exactly the example of how this thing doesn't work. If you're gonna suspend a country for actions that they've taken, that go in direct conflict with what the Olympics stand for, which is not doping and not I mean, it's all messed up. Like, and they're winning medals and they're representing their country. And so it's like, well, what was the consequence?
Well,
What
and
did
that's
you
the
actually
thing.
take away? And what are they
Clearly
going to
there
learn? What are they
wasn't.
actually going to learn
Yeah,
from it?
clearly there wasn't. And I think that the worst part about it is that now he comes out and says this. Well, sure, you can point your fingers at their coaches or whatever, but where's the self-reflexivity to suggest that you guys have also set this girl up for failure because you haven't punished the organization that's going to take this abuse upon her, and there's no consequences, like you said. And if there's no consequences, bad faith actors are going to continue to do bad things. That's just the reality of what this is. They know there's no teeth to the punishment, and that's where we get to.
We don't wear our red jerseys. Well, that's fine.
Exactly.
They won't notice our Russian players are actually still underneath.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess overall, any last thoughts on the Olympics and sort of where this puts us?
Well, where does it put us? It puts us in, right in line for another chapter of the exact same thing. Right from the beginning, the Olympic ceremony, the opening ceremony itself was lackluster. You had asked earlier if it was subdued, my experience, and ultimately I feel like it didn't live up to the hype that I expect of the Olympics. However, there's one athlete that I want to make mention of, and it's the very first and only Estonian snowboarder. I gotta pull up her name here. Kelly Soldaru.
Very cool.
Competed this year, and I think medaled. I think she won silver or bronze in I think it was big air or something. I can't remember exactly, but I had a good time watching watching the wonder from Estonia.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we want to wish Remy Lindholm a quick and speedy recovery, and hope that he and his penis make it home safely to Finland, all in one piece. That was
cold. It's going to be even colder when he gets home. Have you ever cross-country skied?
No, and now I won't.
It's not fun.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network is excited to announce that we have launched a merch store on our website. The store is full of ordinary swag, including t-shirts, hoodies, and hats. You can pick out something awesome and support your favorite podcast today by heading over to ordinarypodcasts.com.
Okay, here's topic 2. We're going to talk basketball. Braden and Christian do not have an episode this week of the Backyard Basketball Podcast, so we thought we'd talk some hoops here. The NBA didn't have any actual league games this weekend because they took the weekend off for the All-Star game. We didn't talk at all on this show about the NHL's All-Star game because it was just really it just wasn't a lot of fun. The NBA All-Star game, on the other hand, has in the past been a lot of fun. And this year, did it live up to the hype for you, Braden?
Half of it did. I think usually the excitement lies in the Saturday night skills competitions, shooting competitions, and dunk challenge. That was far from the case this year. However, the game itself was absolutely tantalizing. There was a lot of high flying, some of the craziest dunks, and Steph Curry just absolutely went off. I think had maybe 12, 13 threes in the game. He finished with 45 points. Just unbelievable. And in front of 75 of the best NBA players of all time. He just absolutely put on a show, showed why he is the best shooter of all time, and ultimately won the MVP of the All-Star game this year.
Yeah, Steph Curry had 50 points.
Was it 50?
Yeah, it says here he had 50 points, which is by far and away the most of any player.
Yeah.
I think the closest player behind him, it looks like, on Team Durant was Joel Embiid at 36. So he dominated for sure, especially in a game when everybody's out there to just look good. But
have fun.
Yeah,
they're out to put on a good show. And the kind of fun thing with this game, it ended on a last minute. So what they've done recently, for those who don't know, it's not just an All-Star game where you get all the best guys and you just have one big fun party, one big fun game, East and West it used to be. They've really kind of innovated the game so that the points whoever wins each quarter, the points from that go towards charity in terms of how much is, I think it's like, I think it's actually like straight up, if however many points you get, that equates somehow to a certain amount of money that's donated to charities for each team. And then what they do is, instead of just you've got a timed game, there are 3 quarters, and then after the 3 quarters, whatever the score is, they determine that there's like 25 more points to get. So whoever can reach a certain bar or certain number is the winner, which kind of makes it fun, so that it adds a level of competition to the game, the fun of it that we haven't. I think that we need that. I think that the game needs that, and that's exactly what happened. It ended on a buzzer beater by LeBron James. Game happening in Cleveland, the hometown boy, and the awesome part of it is that Steph is also from Ohio. So 2 hometown boys, same team, just showing why they're the 2 best players in the world.
Yeah, looked like a lot of fun, and obviously, as you say, very tight. Came down to 3 points at the end there. Let's just jump back for a second. You brushed over and acknowledged that the Saturday night wasn't a lot of fun, but as you say, like, that's become one of the more iconic, kind of classic, I don't know, parts of the an NBA sort of season. There's a lot of players who you think of. Oftentimes, the dunk contest is one of the biggest parts of the sort of history of their career. Vince Carter, in the last couple of years, Aaron Gordon, although he hasn't been able to win it because of some, interesting judging.
Oh my gosh.
But, even Michael Jordan back in the day, right? The dunk contest has always been a prestige thing.
Yep.
Not so much this year, though.
No, it was dreadful. It was really boring. And here, like, so there's always a lot of hype. There's always a lot of excitement. You got some of the younger guys coming in who are high flyers. Jalen Green is just a monster dunker. They get up so high. Like, so there was a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement. There was an interview with Cole Anthony, who was competing, and he was talking to Shaq and Chuck before the competition. And Shaq said to him, "Whatever you do, just make your first attempt." That happened for no one in this competition. And what happens is the energy, the life, the breath just completely leaves the arena. And without that kind of build and that kind of anticipation, this event sucks. And we saw exactly what happens when that goes down. Like, it's unfortunate. These guys want to show off some really exciting things, but you got to build it. And I feel like they were just trying to go off with some of the craziest dunks to begin with. It's admirable what they're trying to do, but if you're not going to make it, don't do it, man. Like, just get something good. And everybody knows these guys can dunk. So I don't know. It's hard. You want to see something new. Obviously you want to see something flashy, but don't make it too complicated. And I feel like that's what happened. The other part of this that's, I was saying to you earlier, is like, the bar's been set so high. Still to this day, I have no idea how Aaron Gordon lost that dunk contest against Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine was doing some really crazy things, but there was no reason for Aaron Gordon to lose that. And
how about the next year to Bam Adebayo?
Again, yeah, no, shouldn't have.
Well, he lost because Dwayne Wade was a judge and he's a Heat fan. But point being,
well, I mean, there's absolutely some subjectivity when it comes to how we feel. But in the arena, you should be able to know who's got just even by the reaction, right? And this year there was not a lot of hype, not a lot of creativity. That was, I think, the most creativity we saw was like Cole Anthony coming out in Timberlands and his dad's old Knicks jersey, and he could barely even get off the ground. Like, it just didn't work this year. There wasn't that kind of flair and excitement. Where it worked really well that we haven't seen before was the NHL All-Star Skills Comp. This was the first time that we saw another league actually try to do something similar to the creativity that we see in the dunk contest. I thought it was a little bit, it's just a little cheesy with Jack Hughes and his magic, but there was something about Vegas too that made all of that work. it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. You're asking, there's a lot of pressure that's involved. And I think this year they just missed the mark. And the whole All-Star game, all the comments, anytime there was a dunk was, oh, that's the best dunk we've seen all weekend. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate because that really is the pinnacle. And if they're going to change it, we're never going to see this, but you want to see the best dunkers in the game at that competition. You want to see LeBron, you want to see John Morant. And we know we don't really get that. I think the last time like Michael Jordan, Vince Carter, these are like two of the best players in the world. And now we're getting Juan Toscano-Anderson or a couple rookies. And yeah, it's too bad.
Well, the 3-point competition was a little bit more fun. Just as we round out this topic here, obviously we had a big man win it. And that probably surprised some people. Karl Anthony Towns winning that one. Did it surprise you?
Yes, because of the competition around him, CJ McCollum, Fred VanVleet. But again, it's a lot of pressure. You're put on the spot. You got to find a rhythm. And Cat's like really gone on this season to prove himself as a shooter and a more versatile big man. And he did that. I mean, it's just one competition, but he's been doing it in game as well. And I think that's why we saw him in that competition. And props to him. He's well, one, he's been through the absolute ringer with COVID. I think he's lost like a total of 10 plus family members to it. Like early on, his mother passed away, and it was just dreadful. And he's come out with an absolute explosiveness this season, and to go on to win this, I think that's awesome for him. It's great to see a big man win something like that.
Well, they'll get back to games that really matter this upcoming week and into the second half of the NBA season. But I guess a nice little break from the regular season for these players, and an opportunity to show off some skills, whether they were great or not, especially in the dunk contest. But
yeah, they had this new competition this year that was it was like 3 teams. So they had the Antetokounmpo brothers, the rookies, Jalen Green, Scotty Barnes, and Cade Cunningham, I think. Somebody else. There was one other team. Oh, the hometown team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's three All-Star teams. And it wasn't this night, but the night before, Scotty, I mean, everybody's seen it, but Scotty it was between Scotty Barnes and I think Darius Garland. Or no, it was Tyrese Max. I don't remember. But they just could not. It was a shooting competition, and he just could not hit the like 2-foot shot in front of him. And he missed like 4 or 5 times in a row. It was you feel so bad when something like that happens, because you know this guy can hit these shots, but like the rim's just making it hard. And then the pressure of it all, the embarrassment starts to sink in. They come off of the bench and they're just sitting on the bench looking at each other like, well, at least we made everybody laugh, right?
Is that why you think though that the best don't go into the dunk contest anymore? Are they just afraid to fail?
It's very likely. I don't think it's about failing, but the pressure is very high, and also too, because of the subjectivity of it. There's been years where certain guys really should have won. DeMar DeRozan should have won. Terrence Ross should have won.
I thought Terrence Ross did win once.
He did win. He did win the second year that he was in the competition. Okay. But it's very likely that that's the reason. And maybe they consider changing the way that it's scored or the way that it's judged, and maybe it's more fan based. Or you could do decibel ratings. Like there's lots of opportunity. And I mean, the NBA has been really good at continuing to innovate and continuing to push and challenge how they present each All-Star competition and game and weekend, and the way they celebrate. I thought they just did an absolutely incredible job this year with their 75th season, really honoring a lot of the players, a lot of the culture. They're just so good at that, I think. And I thought it went off really well this year.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. That's topic 2. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. All right. Let's round out this week with a little bit of F1 news. We're getting very close, tantalizingly close to the 2022 F1 season. Some big news coming out this week as we get set for winter testing here, the 23rd to the 25th of February. So this upcoming week in Barcelona, followed by the second round of testing, which will happen the 10th to 12th in Bahrain, leading us the following week into the season opener. Before we jump in, we do have some exciting news to announce here on the Ordinary Podcasting Network. What was a fun little experiment for us last year, we found to be a lot of fun, was the Pit Stop podcast that was part of this show's channel. It's getting its very own feed this upcoming season. We're going to give it some new bells and whistles, including a brand new co-host, Tyler Walzak, who joined us at the end of last season, has officially signed on to do this full season with us. So what was a two-hander becomes another three-hander, and we know how much fun that is. So
new
Braden,
front wing, if you will.
that's right, a whole new formula. So the three of us will have our very first episode of that show on its very own feed coming up sort of middle of March there, as we get in through testing and prepare for the first week in Bahrain. So you can look forward to that, and we'll have all kinds of promos and lead ups to that, so you know where to go and subscribe to it. But we wanted to spend a topic here talking about F1 as we get closer and closer, and as the anticipation grows, lots of teams starting to unveil their liveries for this year. They're what the cars are going to look like, and obviously it's a whole new look this season. We finally had one of the most dramatic changes to car design since the hybrid era of half a decade ago. And obviously, due to COVID, all the regulation changes and shifts that were planned for 2021 ended up being postponed for an extra year. So we have potentially a whole new sort of setup here for these teams. And the hope from the FIA and Formula One is that it will create a little more competition, make it easier for these cars to follow and pass and overtake, and just increase the competition level. There's a really there's just this great anticipation that we could be entering a new and exciting era for Formula One. Obviously, as we've talked many times about on the Pit Stop show and even on here, that I think Formula One as a sport has grown so dramatically in the last couple of years, and certainly in North America after the success of Drive to Survive on Netflix, and just sort of this new energy that is surrounding a very not an old sport, but a sport with such a rich history that people are finding for the first time. I mean, that's why we have a podcast about it. We're excited about it. So anyway, that's sort of the overview. Let's talk really quickly about the news that came out this week, and it kind of shook up the F1 world a little bit. We kind of knew it was coming, but not quite the way it did. So obviously, following the very controversial season finale last year in Abu Dhabi, where we had Lewis Hamilton leading what would have been a championship clinching race all the way through until the last 4 or 5 laps, when following a couple crashes and some incidents, safety cars were deployed. And then obviously most people by this point know what happened. The safety car protocol was not followed as per the rules. Micheal Massi, the race director, made some decisions to allow the race to finish with only a few cars overtaking Lewis, and reducing and then removing the gap between his championship challenger and Max Verstappen. It became a 2-person race at the end, Max on brand new fresh tires, Lewis obviously on tires that he'd been on for 20 plus laps. He was not at a competitive position to be able to challenge and protect his lead against Max, who overtook him and won the championship on the very last lap of the race, very last race of the season. And most people, I think, watching that felt like something was not right. This wasn't how this should have gone down. Unless you're a fan of Red Bull or heavily invested in Red Bull, I think most people felt that way. But nonetheless, Max Verstappen was crowned as world champion, his first in his career, and it prevented Lewis Hamilton from a record-setting 8th championship. All that said, we went into an offseason very cloudy, very murky, not sure how it was going to play out. the verdict came out of a investigation into the results of that. Micheal Massi is no longer the race director of Formula One, and they have retooled their entire race direction protocol system. So moving forward, there will be 2 race directors that will alternate race to race. Obviously, the race director is not just the official, let's say the official that oversees the race on race day, but goes ahead of time to the track, make sure that all of the regulations are being followed, make sure the marshals are all on top of everything. They run the show. It's a lot for one person. They felt that perhaps it was too much for Micheal Massi, so they have now 2 people that will take that job on alternating. The second major innovation that they are moving forward with is a virtual race control room, much like VAR in soccer, or we have in the NHL, sort of the calls to Toronto. We will have another room of officials who will be watching the race separate from the race direction. They will be able to call in and make suggestions, make advisements, and come under sort of be a sounding board or an extra voice for the race director on race day, because they'll have the slightly removed perspective, perhaps, that was missing. The biggest piece for me is what was unsaid. I think F1 just admitted that their championship has an asterisk, that they just admitted that because Micheal Massi did not follow the protocols as written, that the result of their race and their championship last year should not have happened the way it did. That for me feels like vindication if you're Mercedes, certainly if you're Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, it is no consolation for the fact that he will not be champion. They're not changing the results of the race, but it kind of is an asterisk. Is it not, Braden?
It's debatable and will forever be debatable. I think that there's a level of acknowledgement that the game, the structure of the sport needed further development and evolution and consistency. I think that that's a big thing that we've seen. I mean, in a lot of other kinds of sports, hockey, football, I mean, these are different. These aren't racing sports, but you don't have just one referee. You don't, even in baseball, you have a home plate umpire, but there's other elements that are refereeing or ensuring that the rules are upheld. And I think that this was the first time we really got to see the autonomy of one person's ability to dictate how the championship went. That's really unfortunate that that's what went down, but it also builds a lot of, so to speak to again, the asterisk, I don't know if that's necessarily how I think of it. Ultimately, Max won based on the set of rules that were presented. They weren't necessarily the right rules, but that's where the sport was. And they knew that change had to happen. So I'm glad to see that there was a restructure. Ultimately, Micheal Massi lost his job because of this situation, and they needed to move on. The whole governing body knew that it was time to restructure.
Yeah, and obviously, as you say, very rarely do you have a single entity. I suppose in soccer you have one official, but he has now VAR. He has other tools at his disposal. Obviously in F1, you have the marshals who are in the room. They make the decisions as to what penalties should or shouldn't be applied. That wasn't in the purview of the race director. But in this case, what happened with the race director was he's sort of the one who manages the race, the structure of when is a safety car deployed, when is it brought back in, when are certain, when is it a virtual safety car or a full safety car, when do we have caution flags and all these different, literally the direction of the race, organization of it. And in this case, they felt like, I think most people who watched that race, that, he made some poor decisions in the heat of the moment, very fast. You have to think about how fast the sport unfolds.
It's the fastest sport in the world, isn't it?
Very difficult to make those decisions. However, perhaps they also recognized that there was some folly in having one person responsible for this. And hopefully, hopefully some of these structural things, they are also going to ensure that the rules governing safety cars are clearer, more black and white. that will be, they're still currently working on that, but those rules will be in place, March 18th, starting the season. That there will be clarification to those rules specifically. So anyway, that's that. We have 23 races this season. It's the biggest F1 schedule we've seen, I think, ever, if not very close to it. We had 22 last year, but prior to that, only 17 due to COVID. So, the more and more of these races, more attention. We have 2 American races on the schedule this year, which is really exciting. We have Miami joining the ranks. That'll be in May. Canada is scheduled for their race in Montreal, the Canadian Grand Prix, which has not been contested, I believe, since 2019 due to COVID. So that's scheduled for the 17th to the 19th of June. So that's exciting. They're coming back there. And then obviously they go back to Austin as per usual in October in its regular spot before going to Mexico and Brazil. But when you look at the season, the schedule, we're starting to see these cars. For you, what are you most looking forward to as we get back to racing?
Well, there's 2 things. First and foremost, the most exciting Netflix show available, Drive to Survive Season 4 comes out the day after my birthday, March 11th. Yeah. So that's something I'm incredibly excited about because we'll all get a really good look into what was an exciting season, especially with how everything went down in the dramatics to end the season. And hopefully we get a little bit of a look into the aftermath of that. But I think that with that exact thing, that's what I'm excited for. I'm excited for them to get going, and there's so much still on the line between these 2 competitors, and now with the competition a lot more on an even keel, or a salary cap era, if you will. It'll be very exciting to see Max and Lewis go at it to find out, just what the next chapter is, who's got it this year, and who's, was it an asterisk? What is it, where, and I'm also really, really excited for George Russell and what he's going to do in the second Mercedes car.
For sure. I think there's a lot more question marks right now that need to be answered. That's always exciting when you go into season. I mean, everything's a question mark when you start a new season of any sport, but there are a lot of very tantalizing storylines for sure. I'll throw this at you for the Netflix series. I would be very surprised if they spend too much time actually dissecting the end of that race. And the reason is this: if you go back and watch that series start to finish, the 3 seasons we've seen so far, the first heroes that they presented in season 1 and 2 was Red Bull. Red Bull has been one of the teams that gave them unfettered access, made sure they were involved, because Red Bull as an organization has always understood the value of marketing, the value of those opportunities. And as far as the big team, do you remember Mercedes, Ferrari, they weren't even featured in season 1 because they did not want these guys anywhere near them with the cameras. It wasn't until season 2 that they really realized the value of this, that Netflix was adding, that they kind of invested. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as we go through this 4th season of this series, that Red Bull is still kind of sold as the little underdog trying to beat big Mercedes, and they get their, hero's journey part for Max Verstappen. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the angle Netflix takes, because it also, from a propaganda angle from F1, who is still the title producer of the series, it helps push the narrative that this was all above board. This is how it's supposed to be. He's our rightful champion and all of that. So I'll just put that out there as my little conspiracy theory, but we'll see how it goes. The second part for me, as I said, lots of exciting storylines. I agree with you, Max and Lewis have a huge it's not finished. This rivalry is just getting heated up, and hopefully these 2 cars are there. Big question marks about Red Bull's engine. First time we've seen a Red Bull manufactured engine. We talked about that at the end of the season last year. That's right. A big question mark. Did they get where they needed to get to with that engine? How do these new cars actually fare in competition? We've seen them on the simulators. We're starting to see them on track. We're going to see them this upcoming week in testing. But what do these cars look like in race conditions? Do they actually have the science behind them that they are purported to have?
I love how pointy they are.
And will they perform that way? And then we have 23 races, 1 extra race, a lot of tracks coming back on the circuit, new tracks, Miami, we've never seen before. We're going to get back into a very competitive track in Canada. Hopefully, hopefully it's just a really exciting and competitive season. As we've said, I think it'll be really exciting to see where we are. What is it? The last race this season scheduled for late November. So we've got a great summer upcoming with racing. I mean, I'm just very excited about it. Any last thoughts there before we kick off? What's your favorite car so far you've seen? Because you've got some of the liveries out. I know there's still a couple, Alfa Romeo and a couple that are coming out this week. Obviously, we'll see them when they go to testing. But
the McLaren's my team, and I'm pretty fond of their new orange. What would you call that color exactly? It's like a lighter. It's like
the turquoise.
No, it's the turquoise is later, but the orange.
The orange. Well, they call it papaya.
Papaya. It looks so good. That car looks really good. But I also really like the new silver. What do they call it? Yeah,
Mercedes going back to the silver era.
Yeah,
they had the black car under for a couple of years as a statement about their desire to increase awareness around both Black Lives Matter movement, but also the the diversity or lacking of diversity in their sport, and they've worked on that. But they're moving back towards the silver arrow. That looks good. I think Ferrari looks nice. I like the darker red. They've had.
Are they going to have that awful lime green advertising on their car?
I don't know. Was it on there? I haven't seen that. I don't think there's
last year.
Yeah, I don't think that sponsor is still here, so I don't think that's there. Whose car though? I think whose car really has me impressed right now.
What's that?
I really like what Aston Martin has done. They got rid of the pink because they don't have BMT or whatever is their sponsor anymore. BWT. I like the neon green. It looks a little bit like a Perrier bottle, but other than that, it's just a nice combo. You've got that kind of weird teal, greeny blue, and then you've got that really sharp neon green. I really like it. So we'll see. We're going to get a good look at them all this week as they get out into testing in Barcelona, and then following that, we'll get one more good look at them all. And what'll be really interesting is how much these cars change between now and March, because this is really the first time they're going to get these cars out on track and get a feel for what they look like, how they feel, what they, all of the technology and the science behind them comes to roost now. We've already seen some little bit of controversy around Mercedes, who presented one car in their graphics package. I don't know if you saw that. The rendering photos that they put out on social media are completely different than the actual car that they launched at their live event. If you look at it, they look completely different. So it shows you already from whenever those renderings were done to now, they've already made some dramatic changes, and we'll see how many more changes happen between February and March. First race of the season will be the 20th of March in Bahrain, and we just can't wait for it to happen. Thanks, Braden. Another great show for us. We'll be back next week. Happy Family Day.
Happy Family Day.
Thanks for listening. If you don't already subscribe, you can find this wherever you get your podcasts. Obviously, you found it somewhere. You're listening to it. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Have a great week. That was Hat Trick. Hat Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.